Hello, welcome to my little trip down road testing memory lane. Another Q&A video for you today. Thanks as always for all your questions and comments. I've been on my travels. I've been to Faro in Portugal for the first launch of 2025. Honda launch where it was a double header and we got to ride the NC750X and the Honda Transalp. And you can read all about those bikes in MCN very soon in print and online. Before I carry on, I've got to make a little bit of an apology to Aurimas Bielskis, as quite a lot of you pointed out last week, including Aureas. I absolutely mucked up his question. And I thought, well, why not just answer it properly now quickly? So your question was that you'd bought a Ducati 1198, which is your dream bike, and you really like it. And you wondered why that generation of road bikes weren't always that highly rated on group tests, even though they were winning races and championships. For some daft reason, I thought I read 1199 and I started waffling on about the Panigale, didn't I? But at least you got some Panigale facts there. But in terms of the actual bike you were talking about, the 1198, well, I mean, that is a great bike that evolved from the 1098, as everybody knows. And that bike, as I said in the previous video, Claudio Domenicali told me at the launch of the Panigale that they brought the 1098 out pretty sharpish, really, to try and counter the sort of disaster of the 999, really. And they did manage to save it, didn't they? They managed to put themselves back on track. The 999 wasn't a big seller, even though it did win races as well. I think it's a bit ahead of its time, that to Blanche design. I think the 999s look very, very nice, and they ride well as well. But the 1098 came out, it had like 916 styling cues. So it had a single-sided swing arm. It had the double kind of lights at the front. So it kind of looked like a more modern evolution of the 916, and it did really, really well. We rode it at its world launch. Mark Potter, the editor, rode it at the time, which was in Kyalami in South Africa. But the problem with that launch was it was at such high altitude, all the bikes felt really slow. And then I've ridden a couple of others at launches. We rode them for quite a long time, all the way throughout its life in different tests. But launch-wise, I think I rode an 1198. Must have been an SP at Imola towards the end, which was fantastic. Got to ride Carlos Checa's championship winning 1198R as well at Jerez, which was amazing. So it was a great bike. Also rode the 1098R at Jerez. And the 1098R was the first full production bike with traction control as we know it today. It was a cylinder cutting system rather than throttle bodies, which they are now. And it was worked on wheel speeds. There was no gyro in the bike. But it would only work if you had the race pipe on it, because it was cylinder cut. It didn't work with the cats. So it's quite a rudimentary traction control system. But in any event, it didn't do as well as its competition in group tests at the time, as you quite rightly say. It didn't really have the outright power of the kind of the inline four Japanese litre bikes of the day, you know, your R1s and your GS6Rs, your Blades, your ZX10s. Wasn't quite as sharp. I always remember on track it had quite a soft rear end, and coming out of corners it would really tie itself in knots. But you know, there's more to life than lap times, and you know, it was not the most comfortable bike in the world, not the smoothest bike in the world, but lots of character. It was back in the day where Ducati V-twins really used to boom, and don't so much now. They're more kind of clattery than boomy now. But yeah, it's a great bike, beautiful bike, and I can see why you love it. And yeah, it did win races and championships back in the day, but like I said before, you know, the only Ducatis of that era that would win races and championships were full factory bikes. So bikes which actually had no relation to the road bike at all. You know, different probably different crankcases in some cases in championships where they allowed it so they could tune the bikes, different geometry, different chassis parts, just throwing parts at it, the best riders, the most money and all that kind of stuff. You needed a Ducati to be really trick to win a race back then. But as road bikes, they're fantastic. So I hope you carry on enjoying it, and sorry for the faux pas in choosing the wrong bike. But thanks for your question. So let's dive in with some freshies. The first one is from Ben, or Old Hairpin. Thanks for your question. Hey Michael, how do you manage to make your tyres last so long? So I've met Ben, as he explains. I remember meeting you at the Nürburgring in 2017, and the Gixxer you were on, that's you behind me in my profile pic, was wearing Racetech RRK3s, and you'd done more than 3,000 miles on them, and there was still loads of life left in the rear. With tyres being so expensive now, any tips would be great for everyone, I'm sure. Thanks, Ben. Well, it was good to meet you at the ring. Yeah, I rode there on my GSX-R 1000R long-termer. I think I'd ridden there because we were doing a test of a Ducati. I can't remember what it was now. It's a special edition Ducati. And we rode it on a Saturday at the Nürburgring Grand Prix track, which ended up raining. It might have been an anniversario or a final edition, maybe, something like that. But anyway, I rode there the day before on the Friday and got some laps in the evening and met Ben, and he was on a SMT, as I recall. So yeah, getting more life out your tyres, that's what everyone wants to do, because tyres are expensive. So, you know, there's a few things I'd say. Number one is nowadays you can have your cake and eat it with tyres. You can have sports touring tyres and sports tyres that last a long time, that give you all the grip you need on the road for sure. And you could even take sports tyres on track. So you don't really need to sort of dip into those semi-track day tyres or full-on track day tyres, really, unless you're a hardcore track day rider. So, you know, you can get more wear out your tyres that way. Also, your kind of riding style and your weight and the type of bike that you've got contributes to more or less tyre wear. But the main thing really, I think, stems from spending a lot of time on track or racing. And I see that with other racers and, you know, people that do a lot of track days or instructing. They're very kind on their tyres. In the same way that I'm going to explain why chicken strips don't necessarily show you're a slow rider. Chicken strips probably show you're a fast rider, and no chicken strips show you that you're doing it wrong on the road anyway. So if you think of a corner, if you think of a planned view of a corner looking down on a right-hander, say, so it's just a simple right-hander, and once you start to brake, then think of that corner in 3 chunks. So the first chunk is the entry, the second chunk is the middle of the corner, and then the third chunk is the exit. So this is something that I saw at the Haslam School again and again and again from road riders. And you can't blame road riders for not getting the hang of it on track straight away, because you're ingrained to ride in a certain way on the road. So in general terms, that first chunk of track, as you're turning into the corner, once you start to brake, the road rider does that relatively slowly, because on the road you have to go into corners slowly on the road and then power through. You can't go flying into corners on the road because quite often you don't know what's around the other side. So that first chunk is relatively slow. The second chunk is fast, because a road rider, once they've slowed into a corner, they power through the corner. But then the third chunk is slow, because basically they've gone through the corner too fast on track and they can't get the bike pointed in the right direction or find enough grip to come out fast. The racer, on the other hand, does the first chunk fast, because they let go of the brake sooner. They brake later and let go of the brake sooner. But the middle chunk is relatively slow, so they can turn the bike off the throttle and get it right over on its ear in safety, because there's no power going through the rear wheel. All you're doing is just you're going through on momentum or on the brakes if you're more advanced. And because the bike is turned so well, then the third chunk of the corner is really fast. So, you know, those two riding styles, the racer will be much, much faster down the straights and quite a bit slower in the middle of the corners. So bearing that in mind, when you ride that way and you've got that kind of riding style ingrained into you, generally you flow through corners without having to get really hard on the throttle or get on the throttle with a lot of lean like a road rider would do. So I think that's the sort of the main reason why, you know, more track-based riders and racers get more mileage out of their rear tyre and generally have chicken strips on the road, because that middle bit of the corner they're going quite slowly and they're not stressing their tyres. And you know, that's quite a safe way to ride on the road as well, because you don't want to be going through the middle of the corner really fast, because you've got too much lean, you haven't got time to change route if something happens. You know, the grip level, you're never sure what it's going to be. So, you know, going into the corners with momentum, going through in the middle slowly and then coming out quick is kind of I think it's the safest way to ride on the road. Of course, if all your riding on the road is got to be based on vision, so you can only do so much based on what you can see. So if it's a completely open corner, you can kind of ride it like a track where you go in a little bit faster, through slower and out faster. But obviously if you can't see or you're unsure, you've got to go in slow and then power through. But it doesn't matter, does it? There's no stopwatch on you on the road. So I would say that's how best to get more kind of wear out of your rear tyre. You end up just floating along. You're barely using the throttle on the road, and you can quite comfortably keep up with somebody that's absolutely ragging their bike because they've got those kind of three chunks a little bit wrong. But really good question, and it was nice to meet you at the ring, Ben. Welcome back. Right, next question, and these next two kind of follow on from the first one really. Is from Luke Price, 7820. With regards to lean angle, I understand your point about not worrying about it too much on the road, but what tips do you have to get more lean angle and to get your knee down on track? Just started doing a few track days in 2024 and got some planned in 25. I know leaning more or knee down should not be the goal bit, but it's fun to be able to do it for the first time. I just feel I can't possibly hang off or lean any more than I'm doing already. Any tips? Cheers, love your vids. Well, yeah, good question. I mean, it goes back to the same point I just made with Ben, really. You know, you on track, you really should be thinking about, you know, the entry and the exit of the corner. The exit is so important because that's what's going to give you your lap time, your easy lap time. Like I say, those three chunks of corners, when I was at the Haslam school, we'd always be leading our students. You'd always see them in their mirror. And then you could see as you go into a corner, you would gap your student, and then suddenly they'd be right on your tail, almost hitting you, middle of the corner. And then there would be like a dot in the mirrors down the straight. So, you know, that is the fastest, safest way to ride around the track. And everything else takes care of itself with regard to lean and knee down. And because that middle bit of the corner, you're not really doing anything with the throttle. The bike doesn't want to run wide like it would do on the throttle. So it does lean over more, naturally leans over more. I mean, when we're doing our photo shoots at work, to get a bike to lean over a long way, you go through the corner in a much lazier gear than you would do normally. The more revs you got, the more the centrifugal force of the engine works to try and push the bike upright. So, you know, if you think of it in the worst case scenario, if you go through a corner in neutral, it will just fall on its side. If you go through a corner in first, you'll hardly be able to lean it. So yeah, that kind of the correct thing to do in each zone will help you lean over more. It will help you more likely to get your knee down, but also body position's a massive thing with the knee down. A lot of people at the Haslam School used to try it around the Melbourne Loop because it was a slow corner. It's kind of relatively not intimidating. All their friends and family were watching close by because that's the nearest you can get to the track. And you'd see people do big knee down, but they'd take big U lines to do it instead of V lines. So they'd be really slow. You'd be waiting at Goddard's for them to finish doing their knee down at Melbourne Loop. And also because they were carrying so much lean, we used to get loads of high sides where people were getting on the throttle too early with all this lean because they were getting their knee down. But also body position's another thing. So if you're reaching out for the ground with your knee, with your knee and your bottom half of your body, you will never ever do it. I mean, you will eventually. And once you do get your knee down, you'll be able to do it a million times over because you'll just realise what lean angle and body position you need, and then bosh, you've done it. And you'll always remember your first time. But if you get your head and shoulders in the middle of the corner, so you're off the throttle, so you can move around. If you're doing it on the throttle, it's harder. Once you're off the throttle, you can lean over to the front of the bike and bend your elbow. So leaning forward gets your arms bent. You've got your head and shoulders off to the side of the bike, to the side of the screen, near your inside hand. And then if you reach for the ground with your head, shoulders and elbow, you're never going to get there, obviously. But if you reach for the ground with that part of your body instead of the bottom half of your body, you'll find you'll suddenly be in the correct body position, and it's much easier to get your knee down. And you don't have to reach out for the track with your knee. You just let your knee go floppy. You've got one bum cheek off the seat. You've got your head and shoulders down low, and then you'll feel it, and then suddenly you'll have that eureka moment. But yeah, it is fun to do, and I can see why I did as well. I remember my first time at Manston Loop near Ramsgate on an old airfield, and it was amazing. I still remember it now, and I still got the same knee slider. But yeah, that would be my advice. But thank you very much for the question. Next is from Jamchester Boozle. I think we've spoken before. Hi Needsy, thinking about UK tracks. There aren't many with a lot of left-handers because they're mainly clockwise. Also on the road, it's risky sending it into a fast left-hander because if you misjudge it, you could end up having a head-on. So do you have any advice for improving left-handers, either on a certain track or maybe the road? I know all the usual tips apply, but I don't have the muscle memory on left-handers, and I can feel it, especially in slower corners. Thanks very much. Thanks for your question. Well, yeah, it's kind of the same thing as I've said, really. Again, talking about the Haslam school, we've all got our favourite side. We all prefer going left or right, and you generally ask the students, you know, how they ride, what they like, what they don't, and they'll say they've got a preferred side. And when you go and ride with them, their preferred side has got a different body position from their not so nice side. So on their good side, they're generally leaning forward on the bike and they've got their elbow bent. And on the bad side, they're generally leaning back and they've got their elbow dead straight. So, like I said, with the entry to a corner, if you think about turning off the throttle, then the bike's nice and loose. There's not a massive amount of force on the bike, apart from slowing down force or braking force. And both of those things let you lean forward. And by leaning forward, you can bend your inside arm. And if you just make sure, like, you know, just do the funky chicken as you're going through the corner, just to make sure your elbow's nice and loose and nice and bent. And then suddenly you'll find left-handers a lot easier, or your bad side a lot easier. It's all about body position, and off throttle turning will help you with the body position, because if you're always gathering it up on the brakes and then getting straight on the throttle in the wrong place, you can't hang on to the bike properly, you can't let it flow. Yeah, there's not many left-handed, there's lots of left-hand corners on circuits obviously, but not many left-handed tracks in England, I think, or UK. Knockhill, when it's round the wrong way, is obviously a anti-clockwise track, and Rockingham used to be, which is sadly closed now, which is right next door to us, which was really good. Elsewhere in the world, America, Australia, Europe, you've got a lot of left-handed circuits. So yeah, you just got to learn to love left-handers, and obviously on the road, like you say, there's more risks of, if it, you know, you're going into a blind corner, you risk having a head-on on the way out. So yeah, you don't have to go through a corner at 1,000,000 miles an hour to get the right body position and the right kind of technique. You can do it all at a lower, safer speed. But yeah, let us know how you get on with it. Next is You what now? Question, is it possible to ride a super sport bike on the road while wearing clothing that doesn't look farcical as soon as you dismount? Good question. I guess you're talking about wearing leathers on a super sport bike, and then you've got to go to a shop or go to a public place and suddenly you feel a little bit ridiculous. I know I do now. I never used to back in the day when I used to live in leathers and used to ride sports bikes all the time. But now I feel a bit self-conscious. But now, to be completely honest, it doesn't matter unless I'm road testing and you've got to have kind of kit to match the bike you're riding. I generally ride everything, sports bikes as well, with jacket with an airbag, good gloves, full face lid, and armoured jeans, you know, lots of body armour, and I can't think of the word anyway. Yeah, the jeans that slide well across the tarmac. I'll think of it in a minute. But anyway, yeah, armoured jeans and good boots. And that kit is probably just as safe as leathers were not so long ago. You know, casual looking riding kit is really, really good now. And I always think, you know, when I ride a super sport bike, sometimes I'm tempted to put leathers on, and I think, well, why am I doing that? Because I'm not really on the road riding it any differently to what I would any other bike. You know, there's only so fast you want to go on the road or can go on the road. And whether you're on a R1 or a GS or a 125, if you come a cropper, the ground doesn't know what's just thrown you on it. You know, it could be any bike. So, you know, I just save the leathers for the track. So that's how I get round of looking farcical. So yeah, but it's not, you know, leathers are the ultimate in safety. So, you know, I suppose if you were going to go for a spirited ride and, you know, you weren't going to go to Morrison's afterwards, you know, just go to a cafe or something, that's fine. You wear leathers and you've got the best possible protection. Everything's a compromise, isn't it? And, you know, I'm willing just to sort of nibble away at that ultimate protection with jacket and jeans, just so I feel more comfortable on the bike and I can kind of walk around in normal places afterwards. But great question, thank you very much. Right, next is from Left-Handed Thread. Question, how on earth is the sport bike industry going to survive, especially track days? It's £250 for a day these days and £500 for a set of tyres. I earn above the average wage, not massively, but I do okay. And I'm thinking of, it's just not worth it anymore. How can this go on? Thank you. Yeah, good question, and very well observed. You know, biking in general, really, really expensive now, isn't it? It's a lavish hobby that we've got, and we're very lucky to do it for those who've got motorbikes. You know, bikes are expensive, parts are expensive, petrol, oil, insurance, bike kit, and especially track days. There are a few things you can mitigate that, but, you know, track days in the UK are definitely, the popularity is waning because it's so expensive. You know, you go to track days now and there's lots of space in lots of the groups. Not so much with the kind of more high-end track days. You know, if you go to Europe and you've got these multi-day track days, you'll see the paddocks absolutely crammed full of expensive tuned up super bikes with people in Dainese airbag leathers. So, you know, there is a portion of track days that are still thriving, but generally for sort of normal people like us, they're becoming less popular. You can kind of reduce the cost in a few ways. Number one, do evening track days, which are a lot cheaper, and I think they're a lot better. I enjoy evening track days a lot more. You don't have to get up at stupid o'clock in the morning to get there. That's one big thing. The tracks are normally up to temperature because they've had all day to warm up, so they're kinder on your tyres. You're less likely to have cold tyre crashes. You're all warmed up as well, so you've got more concentration. There are far fewer red flags on evening track days than there are normal ones. The light is beautiful as it starts to get to dusk. The tracks look absolutely picture postcard. You know, I did Donington and Brands last year in the evening. It was just like riding a PlayStation game. It was amazing, and the tracks weren't that busy. And you get 4 sessions, you know, and generally 4 sessions is enough on a normal track day anyway. I mean, they're crammed in a little bit more. You're out every other session instead of every 3. But, you know, that's why you're there, isn't it? You're there to ride around the track. So I'd say that can help reduce the cost. And also the tyres you use. You mentioned the tyres. Yes, if you buy full-on track day tyres or racing tyres, you're going to really munch through them, especially if the compounds don't match the track or the weather conditions or whatever. But I would argue now that you don't need to go so hardcore with tyres. You know, if you went to a track day with a good sports tyre, you could have a lot of fun. You know, we do a lot of sports tyre launches with just kind of that medium rung, you know, Michelin Power 6, Metzeler M9 Sportec RR, Bridgestone S23, those kind of tyres, more than good enough for the track. Okay, you're not going to set a lap record with them. You might not be as fast as your mate with supercoursers. Does that matter? If it does, then get some stickier tyres. If not, if you just want to have fun, you know, get some lower level tyres. They're going to last a lot longer. You don't need tyre warmers or a generator or any of that faff. You can ride to the track then. But I also think that, you know, there's a lot of sort of newer middleweight bikes coming out, you know, R9s, KTM RC990s, hopefully. The new Panigale V2, my GSXR 750, all of these bikes with, like, you know, and the Nakeds, NT09 Street Triples. These bikes with about 120 bhp are perfect track bikes. You can have a lot of fun with them. They're very light on tyres. They don't cost too much to buy or run, you know, or maintain. But the problem at the moment is if you take any like 120 bhp bike on a track, you're always going to be surrounded by thousands. And the closing speed of thousands is frightening. I hate it. Absolutely hate it. You know, you're cringing down the straight because that's where the bad accidents happen, is collisions on track. And you know, if you've got two riders on a track day, a slow rider on a 1000 and a fast rider on a slower bike, you're going to be kind of in each other's way the whole time because one bike's faster down the straights, the other's in the corners. That causes frustration. So, you know, I think that, you know, one day a track day company should perhaps just have a 120 bhp group, something like that, or certain bikes allowed, or no thousands allowed, no super bikes allowed group. And even if you mix the abilities in that group, a faster rider would overtake the slower rider and they wouldn't see each other again. So they wouldn't trip over each other. Okay, I understand that slower riders don't like being on track with faster riders, but I still think that would be safer than mixing 200 odd horsepower motorbikes with bikes 100 bhp less. I really do. And I think if that was more accessible, if you could take a lower power bike on track and enjoy it, you know, even 600s. I mean, 600s belong, a good fast race 600, they're brutal around the track. You know, they almost want to be separated from these kind of new generation of middleweights as well, but maybe not, I don't know. But in any case, thousands are so quick now and they're so easy to ride fast with traction control. That makes them absolutely child's play to ride. The slicks that you've got on them, they're fast motorbikes. And when you're mixing it with a 120 bhp road bike, yeah. So yeah, I think that could be an answer, you know, this drive towards lower powered sports bikes and somewhere to use them in safety. But good question, what does everybody think about that? Right. Welcome back. Right, next one is from Timmy Zoo 1. Morning Easy, thanks for another interesting video, especially the intro part where you share your experience about track days, observations and thoughts about them. No problem. Speaking of what to bring, I'm always curious about how you pack and prepare for cross-continental trips on super bikes and super nakeds. It'd be great if you could make a video showing us how you prepare and maintain your bike on those thousands of miles trips. You're really inspiring the sports bike fans to go on tour with it. Thank you very much for the kind words. Yeah, you can tour on sports bikes and super nakeds. I've done it for years. That's all we used to ride, wasn't it? Back in the 90s and noughties, we're always going everywhere on our sports bikes. MCN, well, we did a really good video on how to tour on your motorbike back during the COVID days. So if you have a look for that on the MCN YouTube channel, it's got a lot of views, lots of good sort of tips and tricks in there. I mean, just going on your 2 points there, what do I pack on a tour? Generally, tank bag, because you can lean against it and it offers a little bit of wind protection, and it's really handy to have certain bits at your fingertips. So tank bag's a must on a on a big trip. Rucksack, so just those two if it's a week. If it's 2 weeks and you're going to need a little bit more kit, then I might have a tail pack on the bike as well. But that's about it. I could fit everything in those 2 or 3 items of luggage. In terms of bike preparation, I would say just make sure your bike is going to be good to go for the next few thousand miles. So make sure you're not going to bump into your service before you go away or while you're away. Make sure your tyres are going to last the whole time, brake pads, you know, everything like that. I've said before, I came a cropper once. I used to, when I raced my GSXR 1000 K5 in 2005 and 6, I used to convert it from a road bike to a race bike every time I raced, which was a faff. And one time I was racing at Cadwell and I came back, I turned the bike into a road bike and then rode it to Lake Como straight away. And I could see, because my brake pads are always, or my calipers are always in and out racing, I could see that the pads had gone really low, but not completely low. So I thought what I'll do is I'll take some brake pads with me, and then when they run out one evening, like when we've stopped, I'll just change them, because you can do it in your sleep when you're racing. You're always changing stuff like that. So got to Lake Como and I could see that the pads are right low, probably a bit too low. So I thought, right, I'll change them. And for some reason the caliper bolts were seized and I couldn't get them undone. So I've got a bike that's almost on the metal on the discs that I've got to ride all the way back from Italy. Luckily, I found a car garage with a guy that didn't speak English and I didn't speak Italian, and through sort of lots of sign language, I explained the problem and he welded a tool onto the nut and managed to undo the caliper bolts like that. And then he must have got the tool off so we could do them back up again. We put the pads in, but that was a lesson learned. Make sure your bike's in tip-top condition before you go. In terms of doing anything specific, you know, sports touring or sports tyres are probably the best things to use, just so you get the mileage out of them. But other than that, you know, just make sure your bike's in good nick. But thanks very much for your question. Next, from Average Biker. It was interesting to hear a bit about your car history on the MCN channel, an M3 and GTI. A lot of bike nuts are or were car nuts too. It'd be interesting to hear a list of your cars, maybe your 3 favourite, why you no longer feel the need to drive fast cars, if that's the case. Well, thanks for your question. Cars are my first love. I used to love cars when I was growing up. I used to get car books all the time, draw cars, be obsessed with cars. I think there's a reason, it's because of my dad. My dad used to tinker around with cars all the time. Classic cars, in an age where classic cars weren't stupid money, they were kind of affordable. He had a TR6, he had a BMW 2002 Ti, which was quite a rare one. And then he had a string of 911s. He had a 912, a 911S 1969 and a 1973 Carrera RS. I mean, that car is worth stupid money now, but when he sold it in the early 80s, it was worth 6 grand. So I bet he wishes he'd have kept that. So that kind of sparked my interest in cars. And I never was in a position to have a nice car. You know, I discovered bikes when I was 16, and then kind of the rest was history from there. But I've spoken about it before, I had a massive accident on the road in '94. I physically couldn't ride a motorbike until 2000 because I had drop foot, so I couldn't change gear. So I was looking for all these things to try and replace the thrill of a bike, jet skis and nice cars, which I was able to buy through the compensation that I got from this big accident that I had. So I had a 1991 911 Turbo, the Turbo 2, 964 Turbo as they're called, in this really amazing amethyst purple. A Lotus Elise, an M3, I've recently had a Golf GTI, but I sold it because I sold it to buy my T-Max. I've just really fallen out of love with cars, really. You can't really use them on the road like you can on a motorbike. You're generally stuck in traffic. You can't overtake. And even overtaking in a car seems much more antisocial than it does on a bike, because on a bike you just slip past, cars don't really get irritated with you on a bike. If you overtook somebody in a car and you're in a car, it winds people up. So I kind of view them as being a little bit useless in that respect. None of them have got even flash Harry Porsches and Ferraris, unless you go to these hypercars. They haven't got the performance of a motorbike anyway, so you're not going to get that thrill. So you know, you get a thrill more often on a bike, and that's why I love them. I still enjoy cars, but you know, looking at them. My brother's got a really nice car collection, as so some of my friends. I enjoy going out in them, but you know, they're so expensive. They're such a big liability. I much prefer bikes now. Yeah, and I've sold my car, and I don't miss it one little bit, even when I go shopping or even when it's out icy outside like it is now. So yeah, what cars does everyone? I suppose a lot of bikers love cars. We're just petrol heads, aren't we? You know, what cars has everyone got? Anyone got anything nice? Right, next question from Fireon6440. Hi Michael, been following your videos for a while now. It's great to hear thoughts and advice from a rider that's 10 times more experienced than I do. Thank you very much. Anyway, what would you buy as a fun weekend stroke track day sports bike if it couldn't be the GSX-R 750? Greetings from Germany. Well, hello there. Well, the answer's simple really. I mean, the GSX-R 750 for me, I've always loved it, and I just had to have one again. But it's a bike I'm going to use really sparingly, you know, just for the odd hour blast in the morning somewhere on a Sunday or the odd track day. But in terms of a more rounded performance bike, super naked every time, that would be my fun weekend sport bike or track day bike. You can do everything with a super naked, you know, something like, or even like the sports nakeds like street triples, but a super naked gives you all of that sports bike performance, every inch of it. So you can have a lot of fun on the road and the track. It's even more fun because they're kind of a little bit more playful, shall we say. They're more comfortable, so you can just potter around on them if you want. You don't feel the need to kind of use them as they're intended. You can pop down the shops on a super naked. You can just do everything on them. So yeah, I'm a massive super naked fan. And the KTM 1390 Super Duke R Evo I had last year was probably one of the best bikes I've ever lived with. It just did everything. It was so comfortable, unbelievably comfortable, unbelievably fast. Just did everything. The technology on it, the dash, the sat nav, the electronics, the grip, the wheelies, just everything. It was just amazing. So yeah, I'd go super nakeds. But what does everyone think? What's their ideal weekend bike or track day bike? Answers on a postcard. Well, two more. This one is from Alex Bartram 2746. Thanks for your question. Hi Neezy, loving your work both here and in other places. I remember reading a story many years ago, can't recall if it was an MCN or perhaps Bike magazine. It involved a test of a special edition MV Agusta. That was in fact the personal bike of a senior MV manager. From memory, he always had bike number 7 of any special production run. The tester took it out and something bad happened that involved the bike getting mangled, no injuries to the tester. That would have been mid-noughties, not suggesting it was you personally, of course. I'm 100% sure it's someone else, although I can't recall who it was. Do you recall this, or could you dig this out of your archives? Thanks, Alex. Yep, I know who it was, and I'm not going to say to save their blushes. But yeah, it did happen. It was an MV Agusta. It was an MV Agusta Tamburini, a very, very limited edition MV, which was very powerful, very advanced for its day. It was the first bike to have inlet trumpets that lifted off the throttle bodies at like 10,000 revs or whatever, just a little bit before the R6 got it. And it was being ridden at a Pirelli test track in Milan near Malpensa airport. And it's a test track that's part wet and part dry. They're on the dry bit. And they were doing crossed up wheelies for the camera. And it went a little bit wrong. But that bike didn't just belong to an MV manager, senior manager. It was Mr. Castiglione, Claudio Castiglione himself. It was the boss man. It was the owner. and you wouldn't want to cross him. I interviewed him a couple of times, and it absolutely struck the fear of God into me for whatever reason. He's very he's a lovely man, but very straight-faced, very serious looking. You just didn't want to mess with him. So the thought of crashing his bike, I think I would have just ran off somewhere and got a plane straight home from Malpensa Airport. But like you say, there was no injuries. I'm sure that bike went straight back to the factory, got loads of new parts on it, and nobody was any the worse for it. But yeah, funny story. Thanks very much. And finally, from Carlos Martins, PT. Hi and easy, Happy New Year, 2025, Happy New Year. It's now January here in Holland, where I live, and they started to put salt on the roads because of the icy conditions. My question is, do you also ride on salty roads in the winter? And if you do, how do you get rid of the salt on your bike, and how often do you clean it? Keep up the cool videos, I love them. Cheers. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for all your views. I've noticed you ask a lot of questions, so thank you for this one. Yeah, we got salt on the roads. I'm not sure if it's the same salt as you have in Holland, but our salt is brutal. It makes the road stay wet. It covers your bike in absolute filth and grime. But it's a necessary evil. I was out on my 750 the other day because I had to take it somewhere, and it was really icy on my little cul-de-sac where I live. But as soon as I got onto the normal roads that were salted, it was fine. So I was glad I was riding on salted roads from a safety point of view. But every mile I did, I was thinking this salt is just getting into all the nooks and crannies and ruining my bike. So yeah, I cleaned it as soon as I got home, rinsed it off, did as best as I could. I ACF 50 my bikes. I'm an ACF 50 newcomer. I can't believe I didn't discover it earlier, but I absolutely cake my bikes in it and clean my bikes with it. So hopefully there's a bit of protection there. I mean, it brings all the paintwork and plastics up like new. It's unbelievable. So that really helps. So yeah, I clean my T-Max, my GSX-R every time I ride it. And also my long termers when I've been running them through the winter. Just rinse them off all the time. With our test bikes, which we have to ride in the winter all the time, we do long days in the winter, and the bikes get really, really caked. And we do our best to clean them. You know, we generally sometimes don't get back to the office until really late, and you do your best you can jet washing the bikes off in the dark. It never really does the job. Always kind of cringe when we send bikes back to manufacturers that aren't absolutely perfect, and the manufacturers mechanics must have the devil's own job trying to clean them all. I mean, a lot of manufacturers press fleets get stripped right down in between them going out to the press, and sort of nut and bolt clean, so every bike looks like showroom when we get them, which is really good. It must be a really hard job. But yeah, there's nothing you can do. You know, either don't ride in the salty weather, or you know, if you do, you've just got to protect your bike as best you can and clean it often, just to mitigate the horrors of salt. But I know in different countries, when we ride in Italy, I know the roads are always dry in Italy, even when they're salted. So they must use a different kind of salt. So I'm not sure what they use in Holland. Perhaps you know. Right, that was a longie. That was a longie. So thank you very much for your patience. I hope you got to the end. If you did, thank you very much. And I'll see you again on another video very soon.